What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father. At Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below. This video is entitled Culture of Not Doing Right by Our Kids. Yes, I got my 3D shades on. Feeling like a 90s R&B singer right now. It's been an hour since you've been gone, and that's too long, so come back home. Can't live without you, yeah. Okay, I'm having fun. Anyway, we have a culture of not doing right by our kids. I'm not just saying black people, I'm just talking in general in America, right? And that culture stems from selfishness. And we got to talk about this. Because when I'm talking about not doing right by our kids, I'm not just talking material possessions. I'm really talking preparation for life. We're not doing right by our kids because we want them to we want to parent kids from a perspective of what we lacked as a kid. And that's not going to work, because at that point you're not raising your kid, you're raising yourself. You know, like, yeah, I know this kid will love it because I wish I would have had it. So, you know, we're not doing right by our kids because part of that is you're not in tune to what they really need and want, because you're comparing what you have to provide to what your parents had to provide for you. And if you're beating what your parents did, in some ways you can say, you know, your kid is doing better than you did. But that doesn't mean your kid is going to go further than you did, because your direction was tailor-made, or your decisions that you made and your consequences that you dealt with a lot of times came from a space of you knew what you had to do to get to where you wanted to go. So when you're having children and you're not taking into consideration where they want to go because you're so busy providing a lifestyle that they have no real true direction, and that's not doing right by our kids. The kids don't know how the real world works because you're too busy telling them feel good advice. Your kids aren't ready for the competitive nature of life because you're coddling them, because you want them to be kids as long as possible when they can be kids while they're learning how to be adults. You can do both. You know, you want to be their friend so badly that you sabotage the truth that your position as a parent holds. They don't get to see how life really works and how adults maneuver in public and the things that adults will do, whether they're positive or negative. You know, you're not doing right by them. Because what happens is you send them out into the world not understanding that, you know, people have selfish and sometimes negative intentions, or, you know, that in some ways aren't really, or should be expected, because a lot of people are taught to be selfish and self-serving to the point of detriment. So you're not doing the kids a service. You know, a lot of us you're not doing right by your children because we're not doing right by our kids because we say we want to create memories. But here's the problem. If you're one of those parents who want to create memories and your kid ain't old enough to remember this stuff, you're not creating a memory for your kids. You know, I took the kid to the Bahamas. The kid was 3. The kid is not going to remember that. The kid is not going to remember being traveled or is going to be cultured because you didn't take them anywhere at a time where they can actually retain the experience. So is that about the kid or is that about you? You know, you got to ask these things. You know, we're not doing right by our children as far as education is concerned because we put all the heavy weight on the back of the school system, and then we complain that the school system is miseducating and educating our kids poorly. But when your kid comes home, what are you doing? You know, and here's the problem. You know, I remember being a child, and I was challenged by my parents, but more so my grandparents, about education and intelligence. They wanted to see how smart I was outside of those books. You know, how much common sense I had. You know, how much practical application am I going to do? Like, am I going to think on my feet? Am I able to turn nothing into something, turn a negative into a positive? And we're not doing that with these kids. Thus, you see a society who is increasingly late bloomers, later and later and later and later. You know, I remember my grandparents used to talk to me about, you know, kids dropping out of school at 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 8th grade to take care of the family, right? Those kids had to make adult decisions and adult choices and had adult responsibilities. And then our parents came. And some of them finished high school, you know. You know, everybody didn't go to college, but that's where they finished. And then my generation came behind that, and in my family, like, you know, my group was like really the first group to graduate college in multiple numbers. To the point where now it's expected. But here's the problem. We're not doing right by our kids because I remember when I went to college, my parents were more, my child is going to college. My child going to get a degree. And because I was raised more so by my grandparents, what was on my mind was, I got to make sure I'm not paying for college for the rest of my life. Let's get these numbers down, crunch this stuff properly so I ain't got to be dealing with these student loans on the back end. That was my thought, because I graduated at 17. That was my thought at 17. And you know, God willing, with help and from my grandmother and a little luck and scholarships, I wound up graduating, like I said, maybe what, $2,500 or $3,200 in student loans completely in my college time. I paid that off in like 8 months after I graduated. So I was like, but you know, but the parents are not telling these kids that, you know, you're not doing right by your kids, because it is. You don't tell them, okay, you know, I want you to go get an education, but when I was your age, you know, the education for 4 years cost what it costs in a semester at some schools, or maybe a year at some schools. So you're not telling them that, you know, I want you to go get this education, but you're gonna deal with, you know, 200, 300, 400 times the debt that I had to at your age. That's not doing right by your kids. You know, that's not doing right by your kids at all, because you want them to have a piece of paper. You're not telling them they can get a trade and make just as much money. You're not telling them that. You're not doing right by your kids when you're doing it. You're not doing right by your kids when you're, you know, not exposing them to the consequences. You know, when you're not sitting them down and say, look, they're going to try to give you a credit card because you're young, and I'm going to tell you how it's going to go. They're going to say, it's this much money. They're going to say the interest rate is this. And all you got to do is pay these minimum payments. And if you believe that, you're going to be paying on that same $2,000 for about 9 years. You're going to pay that $2,000 back 10 times. So I suggest, you use that stuff to your advantage and not your detriment. But we don't care. Because you grown, you on your own. And because of the you grown, you on your own mentality, we're not doing right by our kids, because now we're having kids who are ill prepared for life at adult ages. And then these kids, it used to be back in the day, they said kids are having kids. Now we got adults who with the minds of kids having kids. That's not a good look. And everybody just walking around aimlessly like, I don't know how this happened. I don't know how this happened. It happened because we have a culture of not doing right by our kids. We not, I don't know. I can't tell you how many kids I know who had no idea of what the credit cards would do to them. Who had no idea about their car loan or car payments or, credit in general or apartment lease, mortgage, retirement. None of this. And their parents was in their lives. Their parents just never told them. You grown now. You supposed to figure all that out. So if that's your ideology and you got these kids and you had them they became adults under your watch, you want them to start in the worst position that you can start them in. Even if you don't have the resources, you have the knowledge. And if you won't even give that and it's free and it comes from your own experience, then what are you doing? And yes, there's some people who say the kids don't listen. Yeah, but when it comes to these conversations I'm talking about, some of y'all ain't even having these conversations with y'all kids when they're young adults. So I get the sex conversation and the relationship conversation, but the debt conversation, the credit conversation, the finance conversation, y'all not having. The health conversation, y'all not having. The commitment, the responsibility conversation. So, this is why, families don't build upon the previous generation, because the culture of not doing right by your kids has every generation started from scratch over and over and over and over again. So, that's, and I've talked about that before. So we out. Peace.